if you break up and I can't understand you, I'll just say repeat and then just repeat what you were just saying then.
Okay. Can you hear me pretty good?
Say a few sentences.
Um, well, that put me on the spot. um,
And now it's time for us to digest the lowest rung of pop culture so you don't have to. You're tuned in to the all-new Culture Cast.
Hi, you're listening to the all new Culture Cast, and I'm the Kiwi.
and I'm Stacy.
And we're doing another episode. I don't even want to call this, I guess it is sort of a book episode, but it's more of a person episode. We are discussing O.J. Simpson. Now, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. When we originally were going to do this podcast, what sparked us was they were making a movie, or they released it. It was A Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, and OJ was not the killer. And the big joke going around was, oh, OJ must have wrote the movie because he's not the killer. And we were going to watch the movie, and then we both read this previously, but we decided to reread OJ's confession book, If I Did It. And then by happenstance, we kind of stumbled onto another book that said OJ was innocent. And I was like, okay, I'm going to read this as like a gag, and it's not going to be at all true. And I have to say, the debate is open that OJ could be innocent.
Which would lead you to believe that the verdict then that was reached is correct.
Yes. I do think OJ is guilty of something, but it may not be murdering Nicole Simpson or Ron Goldman.
Right.
Do you want to just?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would say, did you want to share if you thought he was innocent or guilty at this point, or do you want to reveal later on?
I'll start by saying at the beginning, I was fairly certain that I thought that he did it. The other thing that I rewatched, I think you said you did too, was The People versus O.J. Simpson, the FX.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had four different things that we looked at. It was the If I Did It, the movie The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, the FX special of The People versus OJ, and then the book OJ is Innocent and I Can Prove It. But yes, I thought at the beginning of this, like I said, that OJ it was pretty cut and dry that he did it and got off with murder, as most of the country believes, I think.
Right. And when we were going to do this podcast, I had my open line. It was going to be, we're not even going to debate whether or not O.J. Simpson is guilty, because he is. And now here we are like, well, actually,
maybe.
he might not have done it.
Maybe he did, maybe he
didn't. After reading this last book, though, it totally changed some of my notes that I had on this. I'm like, well, I don't really feel like this is relevant anymore.
Yeah, and I do think it is important that there's so much information and different viewpoints and everything on the O.J. Simpson trial. I mean, I don't think that anybody's ever going to know what exactly took place, on June 12th, 1994. Because pretty much everybody involved in the case, except for the judge, has written a book or done something on their take in this case. And, some of them are it's quite evident that they were just in it for a cash grab, trying to make money off of, friendship.
For sure.
Or,
actually, that brings me to another point. I did read another book that I don't think you got around to reading it, which is completely fine. The book that her supposed friend, Faye Resnick, wrote about Nicole Brown Simpson, and she said she wrote it to show other people what an abusive relationship can do. I'll bring up that one later, but ugh.
Yeah, after you had said that it was a complete waste of time, I'm like, then I don't have time to read it. So, I moved on to read through the O.J. Simpson as Innocent one. It's quite a lengthy book.
It was
Um,
much bigger than I thought it was going to be.
yeah, and it's loaded with a lot of information and things, and I went into it with an open mind, which I think is what you have to do with all of these things. And actually,
I didn't. I started reading that book and I was like, OJ's totally guilty. And to be fair, okay, well, to my I don't know. When I was on Amazon for whatever reason, I think maybe I was trying to find Nicole Brown Simpson. This book came up, and if you have a Prime membership, you should be able to read it for free on your Kindle or the Kindle app. And I wasn't going to pay for this book because I thought it was a joke. But I was like, well, it's free, sure, I'll buy it, I'll read it. And the first like couple chapters, like, he's talking about things. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. And then by the end of the book, it's like, oh my God, I don't think he did it.
yeah, well, and it's interesting because you're right. When you're starting to read the O.J. is Innocent book, each individual thing on its own doesn't really mean anything until you put all the little pieces together, and it means a whole heck of a lot. It definitely raises doubt in my mind that OJ committed the actual murders. I think he knows about it. I think
Oh,
he
I do
has an idea
too. I do
of it.
too.
I think he helped in covering it up. I think that he's not innocent. He's an accessory, which I mean makes him guilty by association, I suppose. But if he was actually the knife wielder, I'm not so sure.
Yeah,
Which
I'll
brings,
give you
like
that
I
one too.
said, meaning which means that the jury came to the correct conclusion. Because if you don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt that somebody is guilty, you can't take their freedom away.
I
Um,
agree, except
so
I feel though, I mean, it was what, like an 11-month trial or something? It was pretty long. My problem is though that I think he got off because he was a celebrity and not because they actually did a good job proving that he didn't do it.
well, and there was a lot of racial tension going on at the time of his trial. With police brutality and the system being unfair to African Americans. And I think that did play a role also in the jury letting him off. They didn't want him to be another black man convicted, whether he was innocent or guilty in their mind. But I do think that also played a role. There's so many twists and turns in this case and everything. And I think there was a lot of mishaps by the police, missteps, um, and things that they did that were not on the level, which raised doubt too, in their credibility as officers working cases. So I think that there was a lot of aspects and situations that happened that ended up making him get a not guilty verdict. But I mean, that
You,
is what it is. He ended up serving, huh?
no,
Oh, sorry.
I no, I was just thinking that I never believed for 1 second that the LAPD planted any evidence, but now I have doubt about that as well.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. I mean, some of the some of those officers are real pieces of work, but like the difference too that I thought, like, going in, I had read the If I Did It book, years ago when it first came out. Um, and I thought after that, I'm like, that is a confession book. He just
And
straight up
that's what
said,
everyone said too. Yeah.
yeah, he straight up described how he did it. But, when we're going through all this different, I guess, information and different information about the case, different movies or shows or books and things like that, when you're reading them and watching them in close proximity to each other, I'm just like, well, the If I Did It book, if you were to watch the People versus O.J. Simpson, the FX miniseries, they took a lot of the trial stuff verbatim that they did, and really what he described that he did was exactly what the prosecution said.
Since we both went into this thinking OJ was guilty, we can just continue that thought right now. And let's jump into his confession book, which, whether you think OJ is guilty or innocent, this book has a lot of, I don't know what the word I'm trying to say is. It had its challenges. You I recall when this book came out. Um, wasn't that 2007? I may not remember the year, but I remember when I heard it was being released. Do you recall hearing about it?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was a big deal.
Actually, I think you're the one who may have told me about the book. And I was like, no, that can't be true that he wrote this book if I did it.
Yeah, yeah,
Controversy. There you go.
it was
That's the word I was
popular.
trying to think of. Thank you, subconscious.
Strikes again.
Um, okay, I have. All right, so in 2007, I don't remember this part. That half the book, I think, was more talking about how the book came to be than the actual confession. OJ's part was only a small portion of it. Now, granted, I read mine on my Kindle, so I can't always judge how big a book is, and how big a chapter is. But I feel like a good quarter of the book first started out talking about the book and the Goldmans defending their decision on it. So let's just run with that topic right now.
Oh,
What were your thoughts when you first heard this book was being made?
I thought that he was. Hey, wait. No, sorry, my microphone on my computer's act like showing little dots. Okay. Anyway, no. My take on the whole release of this book was I couldn't believe he did it. I thought it was a narcissistic thing to do, and it was a terrible thing to do to the Goldman family and the Brown family relive this. I mean, he's got several children. I thought that it was just completely narcissistic, haha, look what I got away with book to release.
What were your thoughts on the Goldmans getting the money?
Well, I can't say that I wouldn't have done the same thing. It wasn't so much the money that they were after, I feel like, as just making sure that OJ didn't profit off of these murders. I don't think that they were truly interested in the money, but they wanted to stop him from being able to get the money, which I totally agree with. I don't think that OJ, whether he was the knife wielder or not, should be able to profit off of the slaughter of his ex-wife. I don't think that's an okay thing. I think it's pretty disgusting. So,
When I heard the book was being released and that the Goldmans were getting the money, I was actually happy for them. I do have my opinion of it has kind of changed a little bit, but I am still happy that obviously they're the ones getting the money and not OJ. Um, a few years ago when I read the book for the first time, I was telling my coworker about it, and she's like, "Oh, she's like, I wanted to read the book, but I didn't want to buy it because I didn't want OJ to get money from it." And I'm like, "But he didn't get money from it." Like I thought that was like such a big thing that like everyone knew, the Goldmans were getting the money, not OJ. Apparently that's not true.
Yeah, I think by the time 2007 rolled around when this was coming about, a lot of people had moved on from OJ. I mean, not everybody, but I think a lot of people. It's just one of those things everybody had set in their head that he was guilty and they moved on with their lives, um, thinking that a guy got away with murder again, and they didn't really show too much interest. I think in the book, I don't know anybody aside from you and I, maybe one other person that's actually read this, but um, not that I have a huge circle, but um, I think had this been written closer to the time of the actual murders and the end of the trial and everything, it would have had a lot more blowback or a lot more of a following to it. But yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's good that OJ's not profiting. I don't think really anybody should profit from it.
See,
But
and that's where my opinion has changed from it. Now, okay, if we go with the assumption that OJ is guilty, and I'm just going to say he is at least guilty of something, and OJ is not completely innocent in this scenario. But, if your son is murdered and murdered by a wealthy man, the only way you can try to hurt him is by making him poor. So I get why the Goldmans wanted their, I don't want to say like revenge, but justice, brought, against Ron, who I think was just there at the wrong place, wrong time.
yeah,
It's interesting. The first part of this book was about the Goldmans defending, you know, making the money, and oh man, the whole back and forth. There's a lot of like legality stuff that I didn't fully understand, but I'm going to give the shortened version to our viewers. uh, OJ created a sham company, and he had, was it his oldest daughter? I think his, Arnell, I think, was like the president or CEO of the company, and they found out that like she really knew nothing, and she admitted that. And when OJ said he was going to write this book, I think the publishers gave like 660 like $1,000 as what's the word, like a
um,
payment, like a pay, upfront, payment for the book. And then it turns out that only like $3,000 went to like the daughter, like for cell phone expenses, and the rest of the money went to help pay OJ's lawyers. And he was going back and forth, I think, wasn't like between like California, and then he moved to Florida because Florida allowed him to help protect his assets. Oh, I guess I should also explain something. Um, OJ was found innocent in the murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, but he was found liable in a civil suit, which I don't understand how that quite figures out. But he owed the Goldmans like $19 million. And OJ's like, well, I'm never going to work another day in my life, because the Goldmans are never getting any of my money. So OJ went to Florida, which I guess that state kind of protects his assets. And so he had to create a sham company where he wasn't the one in charge, but he was still getting the money. And so it went through the courts, figured out, yes, it's a sham company, and the Goldmans, after interest, um, was supposed to get paid, I think, $40 million at that point. Does that sound right?
yeah, yep, that sounds about right.
So the Goldmans, long story short, and obviously they got the rights to the book. And so they had the biggest buying right for the book, being that they were old, like $40 million. So then Nicole's sister got involved, and she's like, oh, how dare you do this? It's upsetting the kids. And it's like, but his kids already knew he wrote the book. So I don't think you
Right.
can play that card.
No, and and nothing stopping his kids from picking up the book and reading it, and it would be a horrifying book for them to read. Whether it's all BS or not, or it's this book. It's a twisted tale of all sorts of things. OJ is clearly a narcissist. He thinks he's perfect in every way. And that even carried on when the Goldmans, took him to civil trial and stuff, and they ultimately won that money. And by him saying, I'm never going to work in a day in my life, these people aren't getting any of my money, this and that and the other, he doesn't care really about anybody but himself, and that's pretty obvious. Like I said, whether he's innocent, guilty, whatever that he is guilty of, he's a very narcissistic, self-centered individual.
He is. There's no questioning that. Um, I also think it's very interesting that the ghostwriter had to put his own chapter. OJ had a ghostwriter. As like every celebrity book has a ghostwriter, whether they admit it or not, they have ghostwriters.
Mm-hmm.
Felt the need to put in his side of the story for what was actually published in the book, because OJ had to okay everything, and then after it was published, he starts changing his mind, and then he blames a ghostwriter. So it's like it's just interesting how like the Goldmans have defend themselves, the ghostwriters defending themselves, and then you have what actually or OJ actually wrote. And I do appreciate the book, the Goldmans turning "if I did it" the word "if" really small, so it looks like it said "I did it," and then
Mm-hmm.
they added "confessions of a killer." And they never refer to OJ as OJ in the book. They refer to him as the killer. And I also appreciate that too.
Yeah.
Even though he may not have killed them. But if you go from the perspective that, yes, he did, he wrote this confession book, yes, he's the killer in this book, they should refer to him as the killer with a lowercase k.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, just everything that you can get your hands on about OJ, and I mean, there's a million things that you can read. It's impossible to string together. But like I said, I mean, all in all, he is a narcissist, but I guess it's not a crime to be an asshole. So, and that he was. One of the things about this book, and he takes the approach himself that yes, he is the killer. Um, he the way that he portrays himself is like a saint. Um,
Yes, he does. I completely agree with you. I actually had it in my notes that he painted a picture of himself as a perfect husband and father.
oh yeah, like he's like the second coming of Christ or something. Like he truly believes that he is perfect in every way. Um, he very rarely says that he had anything to do with any of their arguments. He just paints himself as just this perfect person and a great guy and fun to be around, and Nicole to be pretty much a loose cannon, where sometimes, she's perfect and other times she's a complete nightmare and a drug addict and this and that and the other. And, typically when people paint themselves as perfect, you can automatically tell they're lying. Um, Not a person in the world is perfect and has zero fault. But OJ, he is just a very interesting individual. And if we're going to ride right now with the notion that he is the guilty party, then, this book is definitely a good one to read. I do actually like how it's written and how it plays out.
I do too. The ghostwriter did such a good job that when you read the book, you really feel like OJ is sitting next to you telling the story. I mean, he's not, so don't have to feel worried about that one. Boo. Okay. Um, Going with that, uh, the way he describes himself and the way he describes Nicole, I think he felt like he was like, hey, look it, she's the crazy one, but really it almost seems like it's a motive for murder the way he talks about Nicole's, drug addiction, even maybe a sex addiction. Um, I don't think he did himself really any favors.
No, he didn't. He probably thinks he did, but he didn't. And yeah, he goes and on. I mean, in great detail about how terrible she was. She's having sex with all these different men, when his children are around, and she, wants to get back with him and is pretty much just on her hands and knees begging for him to take her back, and how he gives her another chance, and which maybe some of it's true, maybe it's not, to the extent of his perfection and her complete
Yeah,
imperfection. I can't believe it's true.
I
You know,
I I do think what the events he told, I think, are true. Um, but I think there's exaggeration in how each event played out. But I don't think he made up things necessarily for the book, if that makes sense.
yeah, I don't think that he made up things necessarily either. I do find it interesting that pretty much he describes exactly what the prosecution described as what they thought happened. I mean, it's pretty much to a T what he describes in the book that supposedly, did but didn't happen. Like, if he did it, what would have happened? But um, you know, just placement of evidence that they found and different things that they found do raise question of how they got there and what happened. And um, one thing I thought was interesting in this "If I Did It" book is he mentions a Charlie, and this Charlie person you don't hear about anytime prior to the murders. You don't hear about this Charlie person after the murders, but he mentions this Charlie person being present at the murders. And it's kind of a strange thing, because as I'm reading this book, and I mean, it goes into detail and it's like heart wrenching as you're reading this play by play of, these two people being horrifically murdered. And then all of a sudden this name pops up and I'm like, wait, who's Charlie? Did I miss something? I got to go back. Like, who's this person he's
Yeah, the
speaking of?
beginning of the book does the chapter with the ghostwriter does talk about Charlie. I think you read the book and then you came back and read the confession or the ghostwriter chapter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
With Charlie. So I have heard, I think was it Dr. Phil was talking about this because the Goldmans went on show. They tried to go on Oprah's show, and Oprah refused to read the book. But I think she kind of had a change of heart after the show aired, so I don't know if Oprah ever did read the book, but Dr. Phil read the book, wanted the Goldmans on the show to talk about what happened, and I believe it was him who talked about Charlie, how other serial killers or murderers have mentioned, like, well, they couldn't have done it alone, they had to have help, and a lot of times wasn't true. So he was trying to say that, of course, OJ made it up, and everyone who's reading this book is like, yeah, of course OJ made that up. He didn't have help. Um, you know, it, I do think OJ is close to the murder of this, of Nicole and Ron, and I think having another person there is trying to help separate him a little bit more from it, or maybe throw people off the scent.
Yeah, or maybe yeah, letting you know that somebody else was there. Maybe that, maybe that is the truth, as we'll explore later on. Um, but just as you're going through his book, it is a bit of a curveball. Like, um, but it is it is a well-written book. It
Uh-huh.
it is a page turner. It's hard to put it down.
It is a pretty fast read too, though.
It is. It's a fast read. The actual book itself um, isn't altogether. It's somewhere around maybe 200 pages, but the font's not real little. And um, but when you add the prologue with the Goldmans and the story behind the publication that the ghostwriter did at the end, I mean, it adds to it, but it is a pretty quick read. The meat of the book, anyways.
Let me ask you this. The I think it maybe again it was Dr. Phil. Somebody had said, and I think other people agreed with the statement, that there was so much stuff in this book that they said, or at least the chapter where the murders happen, that only someone who was at the murder scene would know these details. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true.
No, I disagree completely.
Okay, because the things that I wrote down that will maybe now I did write down in my notes the trial did last 11 months. So think of all the information that we don't know that came out in that 11-month trial. The things that I'm guessing they talked about, um, for example, he talks about pushing Nicole down, Ron doing a karate stance, which I think it probably came out in the trial that Ron knew karate, I'm guessing, and the candles and the music playing, and then the dog wagging his tail. Now, those are the only specific details at the murder, and I have a feeling that a lot of that stuff probably, maybe not the dog wagging its tail, but I have a feeling a lot of that stuff came up at the trial. So anyone who was probably there heard that.
Oh yeah, a lot of that is public information and knowledge. Like even just from reading and watching other things, all those details are in that material. Like, really, I mean, as detailed as this murder scene is that he plays out in this book, as detailed as it is, it's all pretty vague in the grand scheme of things. And the first time I read this book, I didn't think so. I thought, oh my gosh, this is a step by step, exactly what he did. But, like I said, as I'm watching and reading other things right along with reading this book, I'm like, oh, well, that was all brought out at trial. Like every last word of this came out
Mm-hmm.
of the prosecution's mouth, every word of this. And so it's like, well, yeah, like he would have been able just it's as if he took the prosecution notes on what their theories were and, turn them into a book. It's exactly that when it comes to the actual crime itself. I do think that he was abusive towards Nicole. I do think that's true. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that he was a prince to be married to. I think he was a quite difficult piece of crap. Um, I think that he has anger issues and he's a perfectionist. And if you don't do exactly what he wants or look the exact way he wants, I think that there's consequences. I do think that she was in a living hell. I do believe that. I don't think that Nicole was probably a perfect gem either, but that obviously doesn't warrant warrant being pretty much decapitated in your front, by somebody.
Now, after you've read this book, did you think of it as a confession? Do you think OJ, the reason he wrote this book was to get something off his chest, or was he just doing it to make money to pay for his lawyers?
Initially, when I read this book, I thought it was a confession due to he can't be charged with the crime again, double jeopardy, and all that. Reading it years later with more of an open mind and reading it along with other data that I've read, now I think it was a money grab, just like the books that pretty much everybody else during the trial. I think everybody else wrote one, so he decided to write one from the quote unquote killer's point of view. I thought it would,
Wait,
because everybody thought he was guilty, even though he was not convicted, would be sensationalized and he could make a bunch of money really quickly. I think ultimately money was his goal with this.
you know, and of course, like a lot of people have a morbid curiosity. I mean, you and I read a lot of, murder books. Makes me flash back to the book, The Gainesville Killer. What was it? A Monster of All Time. We read that one.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Um, and that book talked about how people lined up. If you guys hadn't listened to that podcast or read the book, there was 5 brutally murdered victims, college students. They were brutally murdered so much that you and I couldn't describe most of the murder scenes, and they're very, very graphic. And after the trial, you could see the crime scene photos, but you had to go to the library or the police station, or to check out the photos. And there was lines for days to try and see these photos. So a lot of people have a morbid curiosity, and here's a book by the killer detailing what happened. So yeah, of course it was going to make millions of dollars.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Well, and after the trials and everything, you have to remember OJ's reputation was ruined. He was dropped by all of his endorsers. He couldn't get work. A lot of his friends turned their back on him. I mean, he went from like king of the world to just dirt below people's feet, So it's not like, yes, he was still famous, but for all the wrong reasons at this point. People forgot why they loved him in the first place, very quickly. And yeah, like I said, I feel like he's just like, well, all these other people writing books about this, I bet you I could make more money than all of them by writing from quote unquote the killer's point of view. They already think I'm guilty, so why not? So
right.
yeah,
Why
and
not make money off of something people are accusing you of doing?
right. But I mean, ultimately that backfired when the Goldmans went after him and stopped him from profiting on this book and everything. But yeah, like as we're talking about this too, and we'll explore later if opinions changed and what they are. But I don't necessarily anymore, I guess, believe that the Goldmans should have gotten all the profits. I mean, he was acquitted of the murders. And I mean, the trial and the accusations did ruin his life. I mean, to leave somebody desolate after a jury of his peers, whether the rest of the people in the world think he's guilty or not, is irrelevant. The 12 people that were stand on his jury did not convict him. So, is it right to make it so he can't make any money and has to live in poverty? I don't know that that's right either. I mean, at the end of the day, he still is a person.
Yeah, I mean, whether whether OJ wielded the knives or not, I guarantee you he knows who did kill the victims. And if
Oh
he's
yeah.
covering for them, he would be guilty. Um, no, this is the part that I agree with, but I don't. No, we can all say things, but until you're in an actual situation where you're forced to make a decision, it's easy to say one thing and do another. With the Goldmans getting the majority, or probably, I'm a little confused. I think his kids may have got some of the money from a judgment. I'm not quite sure. Did you understand that?
I
If
don't
they got like
remember quite.
if they get like 10% of the profits or something, regardless, the Goldmans, at least if they don't have all the profits, they had the majority of the profits. Um, they said they were donating a portion of the money. Now we don't know which portion that is. And Nicole's sister was trying to say, well, this is blood money, and you're, living, making profits off of blood money. I don't know if I could keep the majority of the money. I'd probably keep enough where I wouldn't have to work, um, and just live a nice lifestyle, but I don't think I'd be buying like $1 million mansion. I don't know. And
Yeah,
like we don't
it's hard to say.
I don't know what the Goldmans are doing with their money, but you know, I know they made a lot of millions off the money. I'm hoping that they donate at least half, 75% of that money. I would hope that they would donate to other charities to
I
help a
I
lot
would
of
hope
people
so.
out.
I would hope so, but yeah, and to piggyback off what I said, to be fair for the Goldman's side, I was advocating for OJ there for a second, but on the flip side of that, we both have children, and I believe that the Goldmans truly, to their soul, think that OJ's guilty
Oh,
100%. And
I do
if
agree that too, yeah.
yeah, and if God forbid, I hope it never happens, if I was in their situation and somebody murdered my kid and I thought that they got away with it, I would not rest until I made them suffer every day of their life. Um, so, on that side of the coin, um, I, you know, but at the same time, OJ does have children too. It did, uproot their lives. Ron Goldman is not the only one that got killed here. And I think that with them, when they're advocating, it almost seems like it is. It's like Nicole almost gets forgotten in the whole mix, in my opinion.
You know, I did I picked one of his kids apparently to look up Sydney, the daughter he had with Nicole, that she was worth they thought like around 500,000. I think she was like a real estate agent. So I don't think his kids are doing that bad. Because do you think without her dad's name that she would probably, be as far as what she is at such a young age to be worth $500,000?
Well, I mean, in the grand scheme of famous people, $500,000 isn't anything. That's a drop in the bucket.
It's
You
more than
know,
what I
um,
have.
well, it's way more than what I have too, but OJ Simpson's not my dad. I don't have thank God. I love my dad. But anyway, but OJ Simpson, no offense, Dad, if you're listening. The OJ Simpson was worth millions and millions and millions. 500
Yeah.
grand. I mean, and she's
Well, I'm
probably
just
living
saying
like
that
in
she's,
California or something.
I
We're
think it was
we're
Florida.
Okay, Florida, whatever. We're freaking in the middle of cornfields in the Midwest. Of course, 500 grand is crazy money to us, but it's not to somebody that lived a lavish lifestyle up until, their dad killed or didn't kill their mother.
No, I'm just saying she's not poor,
No, but a lot of real estate agents do really well if they're selling really wealthy homes and things, like really well-to-do homes. Like a lot
maybe
of
I
them
need to
do.
switch professions.
I mean, go to California or Florida, I guess, but
Um, Going back to the book, we got a little sidetracked there about how much people are worth. Um, I do want to mention this part specifically from the book because it was like a hand to the forehead moment. Like, why did he put this in there? I want your opinion. Why did he mention specifically, and I'm not calling OJ a pedophile. I'm not. I just think that's weird. Described how he got down to his underwear and crawled into bed with his kids. And that's when Nicole was visiting and I'm only telling you a small section of it. I'm not upset that he crawled into bed with his kids. I'm not even upset that he took off his pants. But why did he have to tell the viewers, the listeners, that he got down to his underwear? Did you find that weird?
um, I do in the sense of it, like that. I don't think that that's probably, I mean, even if that's the way it happened, I don't think that that's probably necessary to share. I don't think that
Right.
it's uncommon for men in general to just sleep in their underwear, but for him to specifically go out of his way to say that is a little bit odd. Yeah, and like you said, we're not calling him a pedophile whatsoever. I don't think in any scope of the word he's any of that. I mean, he's a lot of things, but I don't think he's a pedophile.
I mean,
Um,
he didn't describe what Nicole, if she took off her clothes. Maybe she did. I don't know. But this was, Nicole and OJ were on again, off again, and then, she had stopped by the house and, she crawled into bed with the kids and he crawled and is he trying to get the viewers, like, is he trying to turn women on by mentioning that he's sleeping in his underwear? Like, it seems he could have just left the part out where she crawled into bed and then he crawled into bed too with the kids. He did not need to mention that he got down to his underwear.
I agree with that. It's hard to say what his motive is behind that. Who knows why he said that. I don't know. Yeah,
Do you
it does make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like, oh. But I mean, if you're in that situation and I don't think the act in general is weird or odd. I just think that him describing it, yes, I would agree, is
Yes.
strange.
Yes. Um, do you think the 911 conversation was correct when he said take his two fists with him, fist FIST, or do you think OJ did mean to take his two kids with him?
I think he meant to take his two kids with him, his
Yeah,
children.
I that was my thoughts too.
The fist thing
Um,
doesn't make sense to me, and I don't feel that's how people speak. It doesn't flow right. It doesn't make sense. And kids, being as he had two kids with her, makes more sense than fists, in my opinion.
um, this is Now I can't remember if this was in the FX series or if it mentioned in the book, so we're just gonna go roll with this next question.
Okay.
If someone told you a loved one was killed, would you assume it was murder versus saying someone died of cancer or in a car accident? Because they said he never asked how she died, even though the cops said they didn't want to discuss it on the phone. Would you still ask if someone was murdered? Because that was one of the points that the prosecution
With that.
used. was that, oh, he didn't ask how she died, therefore he knew how she died. But
Oh yeah, they dwelled on that big time.
but
Um,
because I think the book, um, or actually, I want to say FX didn't share the full conversation. The FX, the People versus OJ, they were like, well, he didn't ask how he died or she died, therefore he knew. It's weird. But I think the longer conversation was, because I think this was on tape. Oh, now I'm getting I'm pretty sure though, he mentioned in the book, he said, we can't say anything more on the phone. Nicole died, or we need to tell you about it. So he didn't ask any further up questions, but yet the prosecution is holding that against him for not asking how she died.
oh yeah, they really hammered that home as an act of guilt. And if you recall, and this is not a disputed fact, is the early morning after the murders took place, OJ left for Chicago. So he was in Chicago in a hotel room when he got a call from the police. And he dropped a glass. That he was holding that had water in it. He was completely shocked and off guard the way that he would describe it. So, if I had gotten a phone call out of the blue and said, my spouse was killed, we can't speak about it on the phone, we need you to get back here as soon as you can, I don't know that I would ask. I don't know that I would ask too many questions because just the shock of it would completely catch me off guard. And when they're speaking of an urgency, I need you to get back, I need you to get back, I think I'd be like, okay, and I would leave. Because not that I got a phone call that anybody died, but when my girls were in that accident or whatever, I was at work, and
Yeah, you're
my mom called me and said they'd been in an accident. And I asked if they were okay, and she'd just been in an accident, and I think she said something of, I don't know. And I said, I'll be right there. And I hung up the phone. I didn't ask where they were. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't ask any questions. I had no idea where I was even going to drive to. I didn't ask that because I was in such a panic, like I need to get there, that I hung up the phone and then ultimately had to call her back and say, so where am I going? Because I didn't ask a whole bunch of questions. I didn't ask how it happened. I didn't ask where it happened. I didn't ask what exactly happened. I didn't ask anything. I just left, you know. So it's hard to say, and that wasn't any kind of incident where there was a fatality, you know. So if somebody called me and said, your spouse has been killed, we can't talk about it on the phone, I need you to get back here right now, I think I would probably react the same way. I'd be like, oh my God, I'd hang up and I'd get my butt back to where I needed to get to see what was going on and to be there. Um, it's hard to say. Different people react to crisis and trauma in different ways, and there is no correct way to act. And as much as people want to think and believe there is, there's not. Just because somebody doesn't react a certain way does not prove guilt or innocence. It doesn't prove anything.
And that is especially true, I think, in another famous murder case, John Benet Ramsey. I don't think anyone in her family did it. I've watched a lot of stuff on it, and they all brought up different points. Only one of the documentaries doesn't point the finger at a family member. And the biggest reason why a lot of people think they were guilty is that they didn't behave appropriately. And you're going to have people that don't fit into the mold,
Yeah,
and
and because somebody isn't a blubbering mess doesn't mean that they're guilty of anything, unless I'm like, oh yeah, I know because I killed her. You know, you can't draw any kind of conclusion from it, in my opinion. You can't just automatically think somebody is guilty just because the media tells you so. And that's, I think,
mhm.
where a lot of people end up getting railroaded is, and it's not the general public's fault, when information is presented to you in a way to make you believe something, it's very easy to get swallowed in it. And OJ was guilty in the public's eye before he even went. If it was up to the public, he would have been publicly hung. He was guilty before he ever even walked into a courtroom in public opinion. And I said, unfortunately, it happens a lot more than what you would hope.
Yes, and on another similar note, because I really feel like this is the prosecution, this trial. Again, this trial was 11 months long. There's a lot of stuff that we both don't know. Would you exaggerate the truth if you knew in your heart of heart that someone was guilty? And the best example that I have in this scenario is that in OJ's book, the night that Nicole and Ron were murdered, Nicole's daughter was at a dance recital, and they were trying to say that OJ looked unhappy, that he looked like he was someplace else. But there was a witness who had recorded OJ because he was a celebrity at that point. And hey, why wouldn't you record, or take pictures of OJ Simpson? And OJ was smiling and laughing at the dance recital. So, would you exaggerate the truth if you knew in your heart that someone was guilty?
I don't know. Again, it goes back to it's hard to say what you would do in a certain situation unless you've been in it. I'd like to say no, I would stick to what I knew to be the truth, and if they were truly guilty like I believed, others would believe it too, just by the actual truth. I think once you get into exaggerations and things like that, and there are things to dispute your exaggerations, I think you lose all credibility, and at the end of the day, you lose sight of what you were after in the first place. I think it's better to just tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I think that is the best way, so you don't get tripped up. You can't be proven wrong, and so you don't lose your credibility. And I would hope in a situation like that, that's the path I would take. But again, if you want so bad for somebody to pay for a crime that you truly believe they committed and it's devastating, it's hard to know. I would hope I would, but I don't know.
It feels like the prosecution was kind of grasping at straws to find things that made OJ look guilty, and I feel like they exaggerate a lot of things about him to try and prove, yes, he did commit these murders.
Yeah, definitely. The prosecution were very tunnel visioned in their whole thing. They didn't.
It was tunnel vision from the start.
Oh yeah, I mean, you had racist and shoddy police work, like police officers doing shoddy police work. They wanted it to be OJ so bad that that's the only thing they went after. They didn't explore anybody else. And
they really didn't. That will come up later, but they did not check out. I'm not even sure they really checked other people's alibis.
No, they did. It doesn't appear that they did. If they did a really crappy job. But it's like even the day that Nicole and Ron were found, the two leading investigators automatically went over to OJ's place and was looking and snooping around. Now they claim that they were over there to notify him, but I mean they were searching his premises. Like,
yeah,
that's not a family notify. That's a you think he's guilty and you're gonna snoop around and you're going to make it appear like he's guilty too. And like I said, I don't believe by any stretch of the imagination OJ's a good, decent, wholesome man. But nobody deserves to be treated that way, whether believed to be guilty or not. The thing, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, you present only facts. You're supposed to be innocent until you're proven guilty. And, whether somebody's guilty or not, if they're deemed guilty from the get-go, it's not justice. That's not how things are supposed to work here.
Going back to the book, and this is mentioned in all three books, the Confession book, the Faye Resnick book, and the OJ's Innocent book. All three mentioned that OJ did like to spy on Nicole.
Yeah.
And they all mentioned the night where Nicole was on the couch with Keith Zimmelwich, I don't know, Keith Z. And OJ saw the two of them on the couch, went up and rang the doorbell and walked away. And OJ even said he did that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, when you say spying on, let's call it what it was. He stalked her. He stalked her.
Yes. Okay. Stalked her. Yes.
Yeah. Let's call it what it is. And which is creepy in itself. I mean, does that make you guilty of murder? Not necessarily, but I mean, it does raise eyebrows for sure. But yeah, he really, really kept an eye on her and, looking in her windows and things like that quite frequently, it would appear. But yeah, that's not a disputed fact.
I want to know why she kept the curtains open while performing sexual acts.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's the whole reason why OJ said he rang the doorbells, because he wanted to let her know that he could see her, I think meaning everyone else was there. And he said that he wasn't upset that she was with another man, but he didn't want them doing it in the house with his kids there.
Right. Yeah. You do wonder why she did that, especially since it's implied in all of those sources as well that she knew very well that he spied on her, stalked her, followed her. She knew that he was doing that. So why she would do that with curtains open for the world to see? It could be as she just didn't think about it, to maybe she wanted him to see it, to who knows what the motives there were. But it does raise the question. But you kind of do wonder if, since she knew that he stalked her and everything, that it was kind of like a slap in his face, by him seeing that, and she wanted him to. But it's hard to say.
Would you call this premeditated? Because that's how the prosecution presented it. It was I think it was still a sloppy and careless murder.
I think it was a spur of the moment, rage-filled murder. I don't necessarily think that it was planned out. I think a weapon was brought for whatever reason, whether the person had it on them just because they had it on them or whatever. But the way that the murders were committed in such a feverish, hasty manner, I think if it was well thought out, it would have, been a lot cleaner. There wouldn't have been evidence laying around. There wouldn't have been fingerprints. There wouldn't have been all sorts of things, like if somebody wasn't in a feverish, rage-filled slaughter.
I mean, wasn't Ron stabbed like 30 times?
It was a lot. I know it was over 20. It might have been 30 or close to it. He had defensive wounds. He had, bruised and swollen knuckles, suggesting that he got a few hits on his attacker, but ultimately he bled out from his extensive stab wounds, but it took a lot to get him to go down, it would appear.
Sneak peek into the Innocent book. OJ was photographed and not one bruise was found on his body.
He was photographed from head to toe the next day willingly. He voluntarily gave his blood, hair, and all his and saliva samples. He also gave his fingerprints, and he also allowed them to photograph him. We should mention that it was all he willingly complied, and he willingly gave an interview to the police without a lawyer present the day after. So let's all just say that, because that's true.
Yes, that is true. That is very true.
And
So
I
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I will point out, to do a flip side devil's advocate, since the prosecution wants to place that he's totally guilty because he didn't ask how she died, you can say, well, would a guilty person voluntarily give an interview without a lawyer, give blood and saliva, fingerprints, body shots, everything? Would somebody that was guilty willingly do that the next day? Who knows? But you can't conclude guilt or innocence from either of those facts, but it's the extreme on both sides there.
I think OJ said this in his book, and going over to the JonBenet Ramsey case, the parents said the same thing, that they understood why they were suspects. I think even to an extent, OJ, I don't think he was surprised that he was a suspect either, but in both cases, they were the only suspect, and I don't think neither the Ramseys nor OJ realized that they were the only suspects in the murders.
Right. They were both very much pigeonholed. Like they the investigators in both cases made a lot of mistakes, and they had tunnel vision big time. Don't talk too much about Ramsey case in case we end up doing that one.
Okay. I am down for that.
Yeah.
It's rumored that Robert Kardashian believed OJ was guilty, but he still defended him. At what point, I don't know. Because originally I thought, when I heard this, like, Robert Kardashian knew going into it that he was guilty, but I think maybe during the trial, when things started coming out, that he's like, maybe he really did do it. Would you still continue to defend your friend if you thought they were guilty?
I think in the case of Kardashian, I think that he was very conflicted. I think his heart said that he did not believe that his good friend did that, but I think his head was saying that it's possible. And so I think he was in an internal struggle, which I would imagine I would be, if somebody that you were very close to and your kids played together, you hung out together, and you were very close friends, and all of a sudden, he's accused of doing this. I don't know that I believe that Kardashian fully knew if he thought that for sure OJ did it or not, but I do think that he thought that it was definitely possible that he was guilty, and even the fact that it was possible, I think, was horribly upsetting to him. But I don't think that he went into it thinking that OJ was guilty. No, I think that it took time for him to even think that was possible.
Backtracking a little bit, I know we're kind of going over the place in this book. If you're going with the assumption that OJ is guilty, do you think OJ thought the envelope Ron was holding was drugs instead of the sunglasses like he described in the book?
Repeat the question for me one more time. Let me think on this.
Do you think OJ thought the envelope Ron was holding was drugs instead of the sunglasses like he had described? Because if you remember, or going back to the book, OJ talked about Nicole having a drug problem, and that I think was, at least the prosecution, probably brought up like, oh, this was, he was, angry at Nicole, like for getting into drugs. And he had said during that chapter that Ron was holding an envelope. Um, could it be that OJ thought that the envelope was drugs?
From this, if I did it book standpoint point of view, yeah, I think that he did. I think that he thought Ron was there delivering drugs. I'll get to what I really think a little later on, but I think if I'm going to just based off of this book and this book alone, yeah, I think that he thought Ron was there to deliver drugs and be intimate with Nicole, and he lost his mind. So yeah, I don't think that he thought it was glasses.
Which brings me to another question. Now, I didn't know, I knew some things before going into this book, just because of hearsay, public knowledge and everything. But in the trial, they swore that Ron and Nicole were just friends and more like acquaintances. Oh, sorry, you didn't read the Faye Resnick book, but Faye mentions in her book that Nicole was actually interested in Ron. Like she knew him from Starbucks. Like I think he frequented in Starbucks and she frequented in Starbucks. And also another book mentions that Ron went home and showered before going over to her house. Do you think this adds to the plot, or does it make a difference if Ron was a reason, a motive for murder?
No, personally, like, there's no real evidence proving that they had any kind of relationship except for the fact that they ran into each other from time to time. He was a waiter at the restaurant she frequented. In fact, the restaurant that she was at the night that she was killed, he worked there. I lost my train of thought. No, I don't think that it would have played a part in it, because from what OJ says in this book too, is he was pretty well used to seeing Nicole with all sorts of men. And I don't think that Ron Goldman would have been a tipping point either way, whether they were friends, whether they were intimate, whether they were just acquaintances or whatever. I think that Ron happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's unfortunate for him. But I don't really think that he had anything to do with the outcome. I think he was just unfortunately happened to be there.
At the wrong time.
Yep.
Backtracking yet again. Bob Shapiro. He was one of the lawyers on the Dream Team. I didn't know this ahead of time, but he is known for taking plea deals. And this was the first lawyer that OJ hired. Do you think OJ hired Shapiro knowing that he would most likely take a plea deal? Or do you really think OJ thought he was going to get away with murder, especially because maybe he didn't actually do it?
I think Shapiro was just, really well-known lawyer, and I think OJ thought that he would have him as a good person in his corner, maybe get him a good deal since, he wanted to portray that he's innocent. And I think that it was more or less, hiring Bill Shapiro just because he was a big name and a hard hitter. And if nothing else could get him, a lesser charge and a deal if the evidence wasn't strong enough. I think that probably had to come into play. The dream team was quite a special group. Just unbelievable. It was the whole trial, in my opinion, a lot of it due to the dream team was almost like a theatrical performance. Just unreal, like just the everything that went into that. But yeah, I think Shapiro, I think that he was hired a lot of because of the fact that he was a big name and everybody knew him and he was a tough lawyer and things like that. But it's hard to say why he ultimately chose him.
Do you think, just in general, that OJ's kids believe he is innocent?
I don't know. I don't know. It's a hard one. I think maybe his kids from his first marriage, it would be an easier pill for them to swallow, that he's innocent. It would be a tough one for the two that he had with Nicole, only because it is their mother and father. I think they would want to believe that he's innocent so they don't lose both their parents at the same time, or want to believe that their
Yeah.
father would massacre their mother. I think his older kids would have a more objective view of it, just because while Nicole was their stepmom in their lives for a long time, she wasn't their mother, and didn't live with her, and after OJ and she divorced or anything like that. So I would think that the two that are with Nicole especially would want to believe that he's innocent.
We talked about on a previous podcast, and maybe even several, if we read on our parents if they committed a murder, what would you do if you were a kid and everybody accused your parent of killing your other parent? Who do you believe? How would you go about living your life? And would you want to see the crime scene photos?
No, I probably would not want to see the crime scene photos, especially if my parent died in such a horrific way. I would want to believe my parent that said that they did not do it. Because, like, say this was my dad that killed my mom in this circumstance. If my dad told me he didn't do it, I would want to believe him with every ounce of my being.
I don't think your father's capable of murder, for the record.
Oh no, I don't think so. I don't think so. But and then how would I get on with my life? Well, if it was a high profile case like this OJ one, I'd honestly probably change my name and disappear, kind of like Ted Bundy's daughter did. I would
and Jeffrey
I would
Dahmer's brother too.
yeah, I would, when something gets such crazy coverage and this is really an unsolved case, at the end of the day, whether people think OJ's guilty or not, I mean, nobody's been convicted of these murders. It's an unsolved case. I think I would have to change my name and move somewhere. Just because I wouldn't want that to negatively impact my life any further than it already did.
I think this would be a good stopping point for the first part one. I was hoping that we could get through everything with OJ being guilty on the first part podcast and then OJ being innocent on the second podcast, but we're already probably close to an hour and a half.
Yeah, we
Um,
could talk for days about OJ.
we can. I do want to talk a little bit about the Faye Resnick book and the movie, but we'll just save that for part two.
Okay. This
Okay.
might end up being a three-parter.
I guess that's true. That's true.
So part two, maybe we'll touch that.
This has been an episode of the All New Culture Cast. This is the Kiwi.
And I'm Stacy.
Stay
To be
tuned,
continued.
listeners. To be continued. Please stick around for the next podcast, part two.
Part two of did OJ do it or did he not?
You've been listening to the All New Culture Cast. We try to post new episodes every Monday evenings 3 to 4 times a month. Check out our backlog. We can be found at allnewculturecast.libsyn.com. You can also find us on Apple iTunes and wherever else podcasts can be downloaded and listened to. This has been the All New Culture Cast, a Saltwater production. Original material copyright 2020. Thanks for listening.
That's a two-parter episode.
Oh yeah. We've been on the phone a long time.
We have.